What is going on, fight fams and full-time family? God, I love Mark Hunt. I feel like I say that every time Mark Hunt goes off on a rant, but he's just so open and honest. It's refreshing. Talking about Fight Island while all of us are getting our hopes up and excited and thinking about, potential. Just thinking about Fight Island is fun in itself. You know, here comes Mark Hunt. Who gives a fuck? Smacking everybody with a little bit of reality. This is what Mark Hunt had to say, yo. Oh, this dude is funny. Keep in mind, of course, Mark Hunt just lost his lawsuit with the UFC. Of course, he's a little bit disgruntled, maybe a lot of bit disgruntled, and maybe for good reason. You be the judge. Mark Hunt, of course, the lawsuit was he was upset that he had to fight Brock Lesnar, who everybody suspected to be on steroids, but in the end, we found out he was on steroids, and Mark Hunt was like, "Oh, this is bullshit. The UFC know." So he tried to sue the UFC because he had to fight a lot of guys that ended up failing drug tests or had failed drug tests. And he's like, "Man, I'm clean. I'm fighting cheaters. This is bullshit. I want to sue the UFC." Well, he lost his lawsuit, and honestly, the lawsuit probably dragged out longer than it needed to because right before the Brock Lesnar fight, Mark Hunt was on video saying, "I know he's juiced to the gills. He's probably juiced to the gills. I'm still going to knock his ass out." And so when you go into the fight saying, "I know he's juiced," you're saying you also knew it and you still signed up for the fight. So I don't know, man. You took the opportunity. It was a huge opportunity. It was a Brock Lesnar fight. If you won it, you wouldn't be complaining of that he was. If you won and he failed steroids, you wouldn't be complaining because you'd still be on top of the world and you wouldn't be suing the lawsuit. You sue him because he lost, but either way, that's all something to keep in mind in this scenario. Mark Hunt said, "All the fans are doing is paying for them to get richer and richer. All these fighters are getting screwed. So I don't support them at all. I don't care what they're doing. Promoting some fights on an island. Who gives a fuck? They allow these cheaters to get by and it's just business. UFC fighters aren't even employees. They're contractors. They share 4% of the revenue. So why would you support that? The fighters aren't getting the benefits. I think it's a joke." God, man, I love Mark Hunt, but I gotta pause him there too because you gotta think about Mark Hunt's background, man. He came from fighting before he's 40 something years old, so before these guys were making any money, especially compared to what they're making now. Some of these guys, especially the top end guys, Mark Hunt was fighting in K1 and shit back. How much revenue do you think they were getting from those fights compared to the UFC today? You know what I'm saying? With sponsorships and there were a lot of guys when Chael Sonnen talks about it a lot. They used to fight for damn near free, and I'm not saying that that's right or anything, but it's just what's going on here. I think is they realize how much money the UFC is making, and they also want to become millionaires. You know what I'm saying? And I understand that, especially if you look at other sports and how they're unionized and stuff like that. But honestly, man, if you've worked in the real world, you understand how unions completely can fuck things over. I'll give you a perfect example. I have two jobs right now. One of them is unionized. They're both the exact same industry. One of them is unionized, and my second job is not. The second job, everyone works a lot harder and is more accountable because they're worried about losing their job. You know what I'm saying? They're not in some cushy position where they don't have to worry about getting fired and they make way too much money for what they're doing. I'm telling you, my unionized job, people don't do their job because they know they have job security. They make way more money than a lot of other people in their industry, and it can really fuck things over. Now, let me use this in UFC perspective. Imagine guys getting paid a minimum and of let's say $100,000. It's just something ridiculous. Where when you compare it to other sports, right? There's millionaires, but the average guys probably make hundreds of thousands. In a sport like MMA, man, it's really gonna fuck the sport up. whether you like it or not, that's what's going to happen. You're not going to get guys like Justin Gaethje's and Darren Elkins. You're not going to find these savages like this that are willing to go out there and fight for the entertainment of the fans and want to fight for the fight night bonuses and stuff like that. Because they're going to be comfortable. You're going to get a lot more guys just trying to go in there, fight to a decision, win or lose. Honestly, it would ruin the sport. I mean, and so if I get seeing how the UFC making money, but they're also the owners that took the risk, and when they're reinvesting it into the business, a lot of it. So, I mean, I know that's a tough conversation for people to have, and I'm willing to have it because I completely understand both sides. Some fighters feel like they're not getting their fair share, but what is your fair share right now, honestly, currently? We don't know. We do know the UFC is not as big as other sports yet, so you can't really... It's not the same. It's not the same yet at all. You got one megastar in the UFC. I mean, John Jones isn't even on Conor McGregor level, but like these other sports, they're way more established, so you really can't just do a comparison like that, man. So, I mean, I know I went off on a tangent there, but I see both sides, and I think it's hard for a lot of people to see the UFC side as the business owner, as trying to keep fighters incentivized to make it an entertaining sport without watering down the sport. Like, I completely understand it, man, on both sides. So we'll move on to Mark Hunt, who, mind you, just lost that lawsuit with the UFC. But he said, look why they're here. They let juiced up cheaters fight against guys who don't cheat, and they don't give a shit if they die or not. Another thing, man, Mark Hunt's fought against a lot of guys. That's what Daniel Cormier says. I don't make an excuse that I lost to John Jones when he was on steroids, because I know I've fought a lot of other guys that were on steroids, and I was able to beat them. When Mark Hunt, I mean, USADA testing is the strictest testing has ever been. Mark Hunt was fighting in the UFC before USADA, when there was way less testing, and he was still fighting guys. And he wasn't suing the UFC back then. Oh man, I gotta fight some guys that are juiced up. There wasn't even USADA testing, and you were still fighting. You know what I'm saying? This is the career you chose, all the way back to kickboxing. I mean, there's not drug testing as strict as USADA. USADA is the strictest there is right now. So for you to have been fighting for 10 plus years before USADA, it's kind of, and then talk about knocking a guy out even though he's juiced up. It's kind of hard afterward, man. It's kind of hard afterward to come out and sue and for people to really get behind you. Look how they treat the fighters, she says. You think the UFC actually cares about how the fighters or the people who watch? Look what they did with John Jones. They moved his show in 1 week from Las Vegas to California. They took all the fans that paid there. They told all the fans that paid there to go fuck themselves on Christmas. All the fighters who fought on the card lost 10% of their purse. You think the UFC cares about people? They don't give a shit. People need to actually see what they're really doing. And that's a tough one, man. Like I said, the UFC, they do a lot of things for fighters, but of course they care about their business first. It is a business first. If moving to California is going to save your main event and therefore save millions of dollars in pay-per-view sales, then of course you have to move the event to save millions of dollars. Would you rather the fighters lose 10% possibly because taxes or whatever, or save a potential $1 million? You're the shot caller. You can either lose millions of dollars, you have to potentially refund the pay-per-view, lose your main event, take a big hit. To one of your big stars, John Jones, if he had to fall off of this card, even though he could fight in another state, but this state won't let him fight, but this state will let him fight. You need to be mad at the Nevada State Athletic Commission on that one. They screwed these motherfuckers over. The UFC had a plan, a main event that they had already marketed and sold to pay-per-views and to viewers around the world. Around the fucking world, Craig. Not just in America, definitely not just in Nevada. We're talking everywhere around the world, in Russia, in Ireland, in Australia, in Brazil, everywhere. is tuning in to see John Jones. So we can't just take John Jones off the card because we don't want to convenience Nevada. Sorry, man. You gotta look. A lot of people, if they were in the owner's shoes in the business, in the shoes of they were the ones that were potentially going to lose these millions of dollars, they would make the exact same decisions, but they're not. And so it's easy to sit back and criticize. It's hard to put yourself in the shoes of Dana White and the other UFC shareholders when you don't really know what's going on their end, how much they're making, how much they're risking, especially now, right? No fans. But hey, who knows? Like I said, we don't know either side of that. But I think that's enough on this topic, man. That's enough. I love Mark Hunt, man, but honestly, he's a little salty. His case wasn't very strong in the beginning. I mean, he has talked about now that he lost his lawsuit, he's going to, I believe, help Randy Couture and those guys. He's trying to pass the Ali Act, which honestly, that's what boxing has. But I mean, you be the judge. Boxing, it's politics and everything. It seems like ass. I'm not a boxing fan, so you know more than me, but boxing, the top fighters don't ever fight each other. That's all you hear boxing fans say. The top fighters never fight each other. And, I mean, also it's boring. It's a fucking boring sport. So, with that being said, if you want MMA to be like boxing, I hear you. I personally don't want to see MMA like boxing where guys can just go on and fight bums for 20 years straight and never fight the top guys just to stay on top. That doesn't sound interesting to me, but hey, if it happens, probably just stop watching. That's what I'd do. So hey, let the full-time family know what you think in the comments. Mark Hunt, Scarface at Fight Island. Who gives a fuck? I'm out.